Hi guys, pleasure to be with you again. This is Michael Mirdad sharing with you one of our Friday afternoon or evening spiritual insights with Michael Mirdad. Today we're going to talk about divine guidance and timing, divine timing. And this is a topic that came up exactly about 2 minutes ago as we were getting ready to start, and just thought of the question, what by the way, what time is it? And they told me what time it was. So I said, let's talk about time. So, I see that people with such sincerity want more and more to find a way to follow divine guidance. I mean, really, everybody does. And yet there's a part of everybody that also resists divine guidance. Divine guidance is something that is above and beyond ourselves. It's a voice that is not of ourselves. It's not our typical ego self, human self, frail self, weak self, fearful self. It's something like, it's like as though when we're asking for guidance, it's as though we're saying, is there anyone out there that can see more clearly than me? Really, that's what we're saying. Can anyone advise me beyond what I know? And that's why we would consult a psychic and readers and so forth. And what's a funny thing about it, though, is we're only going to hear what we want to hear. Whether it's positive or negative, we're only going to hear either what we want to hear or what we really needed to hear, depending on our mindset. There's times when I've done readings for people. I do that, as part of my work in sessions. But someone might say, Michael, can you give me some insights? And usually I'll say to people, let me share first. Let me share before you give me any feedback about yourself. That way it's fresh and not at all, influenced by what you're telling me. So I might say, there's a challenge with a certain situation in your life. And they may not want to hear about that, or they may say, no, I've already worked on that. They want so badly to be done with it that they're going to say, no, this has to be wrong. But it's what they really needed to hear, that something was still going on there. Maybe it was going to be better to clear it some more. Other times it's something more like they really are not going to resist it. It's like where it's something like, oh my God, one of those, oh my God, that's exactly, wow. It's like you put words to something that I didn't know how to put words to, or that was something I did not expect, and it's amazing or beautiful. I was just talking to a gentleman, really wonderful guy, but a gentleman who had a session with me, and he remembered a session way back, whenever it was, and I just saw him again somewhat recently, and he said, I remember you did a reading. And I was telling, he was telling me how he was looking around where he might live. And a city popped into my mind. I said, I think it's going to be this city. And it was very nice of the guy because he said, Michael, I thought, okay. He thought to himself, I'll just be nice, and say, oh, thank you, Michael, thinking Michael's way off, on this one. And so it's been probably a year or something since we had that talk or conversation or session. And, he stopped in to let me know that, he's just purchased a house in that city. It was out of the blue. It was synchronistic and all these amazing things lined up. But it took time for him to get to that place. And this is very important because that leads us to divine timing. We can get guidance, but this is really, really important. Even in my own life, I see this, but when we get guidance, it's as though we're saying, hey, I'm getting guidance to move to a certain city or state or whatever. I'm getting guidance. Should I or should I not be in a partnership, start a partnership with this person or whatever? It's as though we're asking for the full dossier, or the full file on this. And that's not typically how God works, although that's the way we think or prefer that God would work. I've heard Jesus make reference to this in various materials, channelings, A Course in Miracles, and places like that. But where he says, I'm asking you to learn to trust me a day at a time. And, typically we're like, well, okay, wait, but if you're telling me, you're guiding me to start looking into that certain job, career, my assumption is that that's what I should do. And so we get really all into it, where in fact, it might have only been used as a means to get us out of the last job. So I'm not saying that's always the case, but all too often, it's so amazing how guidance works and doesn't work the way we would like it to work. All too often, sometimes we use a relationship or an attraction to get us out of a previous relationship. I don't think that's the best way to go. I don't think that's healthy. So I'm not using that example, but that can happen. Spirit, God, Christ, or your angels, or whatever else that is participating in guiding us doesn't typically give all the pictures, all the pieces of the puzzle. And that is frustrating, but we have to get over it and just get used to that and say, okay, this is what I believe I'm hearing today, so let me start moving in that direction. But we have to be careful not to pin, the little pins on a map, to put a pin on the other end and tie a string from point A to point B and say, that's where I'm going. I can share lots of vivid examples of that, but a couple simple ones. Moving, in terms of moving where I live, residence. When I was 24-ish, I really had this thought of moving out of Southern California. I was very clear, I want to move out of Southern California for all kinds of reasons. And I thought, okay, so, here we go. Let me look into some places. And one colleague, this was a teacher in other topics as I was teaching then too, said, check out Sedona. And so this is in the early 80s. Check out Sedona. I thought, okay. So I checked out Sedona. I thought, yeah, this would be kind of cool. It wasn't all new agey yet. It was just kind of in an infant stage of that. And I thought, okay, well, yeah, Sedona looks all right. But then a friend that wanted to also move said, hey, I'm moving, but I'm going to the Northwest. I thought, oh my God, the Northwest? Like, you mean where all the ferns are? And, all of a sudden it got me, because that's that part of me, man. Ferns and greenery and streams. There's like streams everywhere and greenery and ferns, and it's just beautiful. It's going to look like, the old days of lifetimes when I've lived in it's going to be just gorgeous, beautiful. So I thought, this is going to be great. So for various reasons, I gave up the idea of Sedona, even though it was an inspiration that came to me. A friend said, hey, I'm moving too, but I'm going to Oregon. Why don't you go that way? So I went that way. Now, remember, this is the early 80s. I went that way and didn't even stay, I don't think, a full year. The so-called Northwest ended up being Southern Oregon. The ferns, I arrived and it was over 100 degrees. There are no ferns in a large part of this area. There are none. They've clear-cut all the trees. The temperatures were higher. There was smog. I didn't know there was going to be smog in my picture of a green forest, So I realized, wow, this isn't what I expected. And it was kind of a bummer. And because I had made a wrong choice, we're going to be using that word, even though some people don't like it, meaning inspiration said go here, but I chose to go there. Just like inspiration can say, don't marry this person, you do it anyway, and then you deal with that choice. But what's amazing in the universe is that everything is cyclical. It comes around again and again. Sometimes those cycles, because of our own karma, our own cycles of destiny, all kinds of things, they don't come around. Sometimes it's weeks, months. Sometimes they don't come around for 10, 20, 30 years. It depends. There are people who have negated and said no to a relationship that was put before them that would have really been a sweet, like a relationship. Like the universe was saying, you have some really good karma, so we have this really sweet, beautiful relationship you could have if you would like it. And it'll just be really nice. And then there's a part of us that goes, but there's an edge I'm looking for in a person, and that's not there. So this relationship doesn't appeal to that ego edge that I still haven't resolved. So you go with that one, and you can be hooked into that. Then you have kids, it's harder to leave. Then you have financial, all this stuff, it's harder to leave. Then you have time invested, it's harder to leave. And before you know it, 30 years, 40 years, and at some point you finally go, perhaps you leave. But why not sooner? Because, you can say it's because really, sometimes the door doesn't open for us to go again. Free will can kick the damn door open if you really, want to get to that. But if we're just waiting for it to be all so obvious, it won't always be so obvious, because when it was obvious, we didn't listen, and we have our little rounds to go now. So in my situation, I chose to go the other direction due to my own weaknesses, doubts, fears. I thought it'd be easier and went the other way. Not even a year there. And it was, it just wasn't great. It just, I was already a teacher and all that. And I went there and I found that there was a lot of poverty consciousness and challenges and so on. And there were some really nice people, don't get me wrong, but it just wasn't quite with it. And so, strangely, the cycle brings me back. This is important wording. I had to go back to Southern California. You see, we go back sometimes literally to start from scratch because of having done a cycle and then going back to get ready so that the timing is better. So I went back, and really I had to go back to clear some other things up on more than one level. Now I was, let's say, more ready, and now it was me, not going with someone, but it was me. I was ready. And I had already had 2 children by this time. So it's like, okay, so off, and I go back to Southern Oregon. And I went back there because, at least, even though it was me and not following another person, but it was me deciding, it was still familiar. I couldn't imagine having gone to a completely strange city. So it was familiar, and that was okay, because knew some people, and teaching probably started easier because I knew people. So I went there and used it. I was going to kind of use it as a home base, but to continue my traveling and teaching. And as it were, I stayed there for only a few more years, but it was a few years. And then I really got to do what was me all the way, which is now muster up the courage, the maturity, and so on. And I go all the way. And I went to Northern Washington State for several years. There, stayed for a long time, and that's where I found the streams. I remember driving the freeway on the way up to the north where I was going to go. And I remember going, even on the side of the streets, the side of the freeways, you can see water streaming off the hills and mountains. It's like, it just spoke to me. The greenery, the lushness, the beauty, the streams and all that. Just loved it. So I knew I was home. That was a more real thing. But understand that this took a couple of mini cycles, a 1-year cycle first, then back home, back to Southern Cal, then a few years, and mustering up whatever, and then on to where, it was really for me. Now, I was there for, 20 years or something. And then all of a sudden, the people in Sedona are asking me to come and be a spiritual teacher here. And so I came and did this. But if you think about it, even though I chose going north, it didn't work out a couple times, it eventually worked out nicely. But I still ended up going to Sedona where I would have gone in the beginning. So not all of our detours end up being, let's say, lessons and challenges. It ended up being great. I mean, my gosh, I loved the Pacific Northwest once I got to the real version of it that wasn't all clear cut and hot and, what I dealt with in the southern region. So I loved that area, but I love Sedona. So think about this. It's what happens. It's choices we make, and the door opens, and then it comes around again. So after all that time, here I am. It's been, 30 years. Maybe it was more. I think it was 30 years before I ended up in Sedona. So, is that humorous? Is that, some people say, Sedona's calling you, or, you fate or destiny or things like that. There are some things that are lined up for us, and others have far more options to it all. But the way guidance works is usually it's a bit at a time. So my going to, make decisions, my choosing to make decisions, my going to this town or that town, if I typically advised a person, or if you yourself were making a decision, you might say, if I'm going to move to a city, people will tell you, have your job in place and all that. That's totally wise. It's common sense. Spirit sometimes is going to say, move to a certain city, and you're thinking, oh, that means everything's automatically going to work. You might be moving there only to stay for a day and a half. Could be for a week or a year. It's our head that gets into the insecurities, because if we don't know, humans love to know. If we don't know, then we start conjuring. We start manufacturing. Hey, this must be the reason why I'm going to do this or that. When I came to Sedona, finally, I thought, well, as far as I know, it's maybe for a couple of years at the most. And here it's 7 years. Now that one wasn't like caught me, it didn't blindside me, because I was open to more. Because the smarter we are, really, the wiser we are, the more we learn to kind of go with the route of staying open. But I came here and I was kind of open. At the same time, I remember thinking I was considering moving to Colorado. Didn't know where, why, how, what I was going to do, what town or anything, but I thought about it. And it's strange, because when I came to Sedona, I was thinking maybe I was going to go to Colorado, but didn't. Now I'm here for 7 years. And lo and behold, this idea comes up that we might be developing a retreat in Colorado. So Spirit tells me 7 years ago, Colorado. I think, okay, maybe I'll start aiming my car towards Colorado. And I end up in Sedona. And there's more pieces to that I won't get into, but I end up in Sedona. And then 7 years later, Colorado. Remember, early 80s, Sedona. And then 30 years later, it's Sedona. So even when there's a destiny, a purpose to something, humans are not really always going to know why and the when. You might hear Sedona, you might hear Alaska, whatever you hear, you might be hearing something that's symbolic and not literal. You might be hearing you're going to go there someday. Or you might be hearing accurately, by your assumption, I'm supposed to go there now. It gets very confusing. It's even disheartening, because, gosh, someone might say, am I supposed to be with this person? And they hear yes, and then they think, okay, the guidance was there. They used prayer. They used a pendulum. They saw a psychic, the cards, everything. Yes, they have children with that person, and then go, it all fell apart. How did that happen? You already asked, should I spend some time with this person? Should I be with him? Sure. The answer was yes. It didn't say have children. You went and had children, so you changed the outcome of what was guided. And we do this all the time. And it's almost impossible to not have that and to not run into that. So it gets to be very challenging. All we can do, and it sounds like a really kind of a weak piece of advice, is stay in touch and do micro adjustments constantly. Just like the steering wheel of a car, you're never actually holding it exactly steady. Think about it. There's always a little of this. Why is that? Oh, just because we're, bored, so we move a little left, right. We don't want to just sit still. No, you're always micro adjusting that vehicle when you're driving. And the same thing happens with spirituality, spiritual growth, and getting guidance. We should be making adjustments. If we get fixed, then we're going to go off the road, which is what we do with our guidance. We thought we're supposed to do this, but we're supposed to do that, and so on and so on. That's why I said, even when I get guidance and received guidance about doing a retreat, it doesn't mean we automatically go into a retreat. I said all along, we also stay in touch, because at any moment it could expire, meaning it could have been just a thing Spirit puts in front of us to help some of us get together and communicate. And it could be that we communicate because 20 years later we do something else from that original conversation. That's what gets crazy about the whole thing. You never know what pieces will come from what thing. It could be symbolic. It could be about getting us to get together. Sometimes it's a test to get us kind of going in that direction to find out who our friends are. To find out, like, because some people go, oh, well, now you're talking about a retreat, and I thought you were going to live in Sedona forever, and, my feelings are hurt because, I thought you were a friend, and they get mad and then they don't talk to you anymore. And sometimes that's a piece of it too. It's a multi-layered, multi-dimensional experience or process, right? Like everything. So think about whatever guidance you get to not get fixed. Do not get your hands stuck on that wheel. Micro adjustments, which means start every day, constantly in that, what would you have me do today? And you get some new ideas. And then you go, okay. And for me, I get that a lot, thank God, I get that a lot. Some ideas and insights and boom, 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 get it rolling this way and that way. But I still have to be careful because at any time, I can find myself going, wow, this is really all coming together. This is exciting. And still, you run into those moments where a challenge arises, a block, an obstacle. And we think automatically that means, oh, I guess this isn't supposed to happen. A lot of people do that. In the spiritual community, the New Age community and all that, there's people that walk around doing that. Well, I was thinking of doing such and such, but I guess it's not meant to be because, a toothpick fell in my path today and it was too high for me to step over it. A twig or whatever, And I saw it as I shouldn't, as an obstacle. It's like, wow. I get people with that, with coming to workshops. They'll say, oh, I really want to come to that workshop of yours. I'll say, great, well, see you there. Oh, no, I was thinking about it, but then I picked up the phone to call the airline to book my flight, and the phone was busy. I took that as a sign. And that's called hyper superstitious. And it's really unhealthy. I think within reason to say signs and synchronicities, absolutely. But when you let all these things control you to where any little twinge, twinkle, or whatever happens, it's ridiculous. Because now you're letting these things be your God. So we want guidance, and we say, oh, this thing is telling me I shouldn't do this. That's not so. What you do is, in my opinion, you change what you can and you accept what you can't. But first you have to ask yourself, have you really, truly done all you can to change what you can? Because if you picked up the phone and it was a busy signal, try it twice, try it 3 times. Did you really, really try? Yeah, but all through the day. What about the next day? See, where do you draw the line and say, I guess it wasn't meant to be? Well, if I kept dialing the phone and it's blocked, it depends on the topic, let's say, of the workshop. Let's say the workshop was on getting divine guidance. Maybe my lesson is, as soon as there's an obstacle, I should always give up. Could be, but unlikely. Maybe the lesson is something more along the lines of, if the phone's not working, I wonder if I need to do some inner work and do some release and then see what happens, because likely you'll find that when you move your stuff out of the way internally, right, the internal stuff, all of a sudden the phone dials. People that have worked for me over the years we've had this kind of funny banter about this one particular thing pretty consistently, which is they try something, they try and make a call, and they'll try again and again and again and again. The poor things, and it's just not working, and it's an important call. Then I'll say, okay, can you do me a favor, make that call? And they'll say, oh, I've already done it 5 times today and it didn't go through. Well, go ahead and check now, and it'll ring. And then we'll have a laugh because, they'll say, how do you do that? And I'll say, I have a different mind than you have. Your mind was saying something about blocking it or not wanting to make the call or whatever it is, and I didn't have that same, thing. So when it comes to guidance, there's one thing that's really important to really, really understand, and please share this with people that feel like or think that they run into an obstacle and say, well, it wasn't meant to be. Before you do that, I've used this analogy before, but it's so important it's worth repeating. Imagine you're here and your goal is here. Now, if your goal is, let's say, just using a figure of speech, your goal is a huge goal, this big, and there's an obstacle that's this big, I don't think that the obstacle is telling me by proportion that it should be in my way, meaning use it as a stepping stone instead of a stumbling block. If it's only this big, but my goal is this big, for example, if God told me you're going to need to invest $10 in lottery tickets and I'm going to win $1 million, was the $10 worth $1 million? Well, of course. What if you spent $1 million to get a $10 lottery ticket? Is that obstacle proportionately worth it? It is not. I mean, that's common sense. So what you want to do is ask yourself, whenever you're making a decision, one way to know about whether you should pursue this or not is that when you've run into an obstacle or a doubt, what is the payoff at the end of the day? Payoff, for lack of a better phrase or word. What's the payoff? If I were a person who had an injury and I had to do all the physical therapy, which can be quite painful and quite extensive and time-consuming, but it means I walk again, is that worth it? Yeah, I would say so for most people, right? Think about that. Think if the payoff is worth it. So if you're in a relationship or a job and you say, what's the payoff? You could say, in 6 months I retire, and the payoff is I get a major package to retire on. Is 6 months worth it? I would say yes. How about a year? Sure. 2 years? Probably. 18 years? No. You see, if I'm not happy there. So use this common sense. Don't blame things on, oh, it's not divine timing, or it is divine timing. Oh, it's not meant to be, or it is. Use common sense sometimes. I want to come back to the divine timing in just a second, but use common sense. And this is one thing that will help you make a lot of decisions. Is it worth it? It could be your favorite food, and it costs you a lot of money to have that dish. And you don't have a lot, then it's maybe not worth it just for that one plate. Maybe it is. Maybe that's a goal you set for yourself, and it's worth saving up that $50. If $50 is an expensive meal, I don't know. But if $50 is worth it, then do it. If it's worth the food. At the same time, learning to discern. Some jobs are not worth staying longer if you're not happy. Is training for a different job worth doing the training? If it gave me a job I blissed out over, of course. See, like that. Relationships, same thing. Well, I'm going to stay a bit longer. How much longer? 6 months? Can you do it? Sure, I think I can do 6 months. Or I'm going to wait till the kids are 18, except they're 3 months old now. Maybe 18 is just too long away. Use that as a bit of your own discernment. Use that measure to kind of help you. If the payoff is worth it, man, if there's that beautiful golden doorway out here and things that are in your way are manageable enough, they're worth it. They're things that are there. Essentially, what's amazing is sometimes Spirit itself is, you could say, Spirit puts those obstacles there. Not literally, you could say, but in a way it allows us to put those obstacles there, because sometimes those are things that we need to heal in order to gain the consciousness to have that thing at the end of the tunnel. So, back to the divine timing, keep it in mind that when people, cop out on that whole divine timing concept, that whole, well, it's not meant to be careful with that. Because people are not in their divine minds, therefore they don't typically know divine timing, okay? They're just doing the best they can to kind of sort it out. But the best cure for it all, preventative of your frustrations and the cure, stay connected and keep asking every day. Start with an I don't know, a prayer of the divine feminine. Oh, I'm open. I'm open. Rather than I've got this figured out, I'm a manifester of my destiny, that kind of thing. I use that when I do my January online course. You might set your calendar for that because that'll come around in January. But that's a co-creating a new life with God. You see, it's a co-creating course, not a creating, not a making things happen course. That's where I differ from a lot of teachers. I'm not a make it happen as much as to be a co-creator. The humility and simplicity, you could call it, but the humility is a very important building block for us to be truly great people. I mean, honestly, we think that being great is determined by our autonomy away from need or away from any kind of dependence on spirit, because then it makes us look like, feel like, think like we are God. And all that is another ego ploy, and people fall for it. Even spiritual people fall for it. Back to the humility, man. Back to the humility. The divine feminine concept has many meanings, but one of them is to birth humility in us. The divine feminine, when you look at Hindu belief systems, the Trinity of God, there's the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer. And it's really a kind of an awkward or odd term. The creator, God, part of God, which is the Father. The preserver, which is like the Christ or the Son, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Trinity. So it's like the Father is the creator, the Son is the preserver, the Holy Spirit, which is like the divine mother, is the destroyer. So she gets that one, like, wow. Once again, the women get the low end of the game here, and it looks that way, but it isn't. It's all equal. And I think it's a unfortunate term to put to that, destroyer, but I love it. It's because the divine mother is going to say, that's in the Bible, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. They're both God, but the Father aspect sort of breathes life. But the mother will say, anything that you need changed, I'm the one that's going to help you in your material life. Maternal mother. I'm the one who takes care of you maternally. So I'm the one who takes care of you materially. So in your material life, when you're overly attached to something, I'm going to find a way to shake it up to get you out of that so you can learn more. When you're not understanding something, I'm going to try to bring that to you. So she's the one who works with us on a daily basis. That's why Jesus said, even though I'm leaving, I'm going to leave you with the Comforter. That's the mother, the divine mother. So she's here to birth us daily, not once. I die daily, I'm born again daily. This whole notion of one time born again, God, I remember when I was in high school, I loved anything spiritual then, and I would just hang out with anybody that I could see that would talk about spirituality. But I noticed a couple of guys I knew who were kind of getting excited about this big church that kind of came up into the region I lived in. And it was really growing fast. And it was a fundamental Christian church. So these guys, and there were a lot of great qualities about that center, but these guys started attending a little bit. Now they'd come back to high school, and they would all use all the languaging, blessed, oh yes, Jesus, I was blessed by the Lord today. And I loved hearing that. I was like, I love it. But I was noticing it wasn't really applied, like, I'm like, oh, cool. So let's talk. What did you hear about yesterday? Did you go to that last night? Wow, what did you get? And let's talk. And I noticed they would go, well, Jesus and Lord and all that. And then if people would walk by, they would go, because, and they would start whispering. And I was going, oh. So we're into the Lord as long as it's nice and quiet, as long as it's secret and private. And I understand that, because there's times for being tactful and respectful of other people's beliefs around us. That's just not what was happening here. This was more of it was a convenience thing. You'd see people talking God and getting high all the same. And I know some folks, believe that that's a legitimate part of spirituality, but because, it's the old saying, when you're a child, you acted as a child, but eventually grow up. That's not what the Bible says, but I'm paraphrasing. When I was a child, I was like a child. Now I'm a man, so I am like a man. It means I put away childish things. So even addictions are just our own childish things. And you can excuse the addiction, you can excuse the behavior, but it's so much nicer just to own it and say, yeah, there's one of my childish things. I haven't quite got past that yet. It's okay that you need to smoke a joint to get relaxed if that's what you need to do. Just see it for what it is. I wouldn't shame it, but I also wouldn't say that God told me this is the only way to get relaxed. There's a time when we can put it aside and all things that we thought were important and make God or Spirit our priority again. So again, you find yourself, you still, have certain attractions or addictions or compulsions. Don't shame them. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. I'm certainly one who has spoken up against people that try to justify those things as God ordained. I don't buy that at all. But I certainly don't believe in the opposite, shaming ourselves. So going easier on ourselves, and when you have to make decisions you're not sure, go easy, because man, we're gonna make sometimes choices on roads that have more bumps. And the most important thing for us is not to say, I should have taken that other road. That's not actually going to help. Using an analogy that I used often in my mastery teachings, you're going down this river, right? The river of life. You're going down this river. And then picture that as you're moving, I'll go this direction, like moving up this river, and then it forks like so. So let's say that before you got to the fork in the river, you pull the boat to the side, you see a guy out there, like a river guide, and you say, hey, how's it up ahead? Oh, it's pretty nice. You're going to hit some rapids, but you can manage it pretty good. You might want to take the left fork, Oh, great. Okay. So then you get back in your boat, you start rowing, and you take the advice and you take the left fork. And let's say that the left fork, he assumed you could handle, and it was rapids, and it was really, really treacherous, At that point, should you, if you're going to be a master in that moment, should you be, at that moment, everything's rocky, everything's dangerous, should you be saying, God, I should have taken the right fork, or I hate that guy for telling me to take the left fork? Your thoughts shouldn't be on any other thing but right here, right now. Put your oar in the water and start moving. Let's go. This is what's happening right now. So our job when we seem to have made a choice that didn't seem quite right is to recenter, reconfigure, recalibrate, and get in the moment as best we can. And thank God, Spirit is so far more than any human mind can ever fathom, is so compassionate and is so loving. All it ever wants to do is say, how can I help? So Spirit's just saying, how can I help? Well, I'm looking for challenges. I wouldn't advise it, but how can I help? And there we go. And we're supported through challenges. I'm looking for the easy way to go through life. Oh, I highly recommend that. How can I help? And it supports us through that as well. And when we choose one, we think, because we're linear and humans, act so linearly, we think I guess that's it. That's it. I mean, that's it. I'm done, right? I've already given my body to someone, or I've already married, or I've already taken this job or chosen this career. We think that's it. Lots and lots of people have tried to tell us over and over that careers they chose and then didn't work out. They chose a different career and life all opened up. And they're out there telling us. They've written books, or they've told the stories and said, God, my whole life opened up when I made a different choice, when I moved from this country to that country, or when I gave up my old ways of living and addictions or whatever it was to a new life. I mean, it's never too late. You can be the most full-blown addict. And there are many. One probably by name that we all know, Alice Cooper. He still does his, the makeup and the concerts and all that. But he's absolutely a born-again Christian, and he's been a Christian for a long time. And his is a sincere thing. Tim Allen, the comedian, Home Improvement show and all that. I really have respect for these guys. I never think about I wonder what church, what religion. Some people do that. I wonder if they're my religion, because I won't listen to them unless they're my religion. Those are fools. Those are just human fools talking. That's not God. That's foolishness. People that still have small thinking and competitive thinking. We should just be so blessed. We should be so proud that a brother, sister of ours found God in some form. So when Tina Turner found Buddhism, God bless her, man, that's fantastic. How could that not be a better thing than being married to the nutty person she was married to, who was beating her up and all that? That's not cool. She found something great. How can that not be, God inspired, God supported? She supported even when she made poor choices, but hey, now we're on the easy path. And God would always prefer the easy way, because it knows that one way we're hurting. It knows that we're going to get there no matter what, but it would prefer that we're not in pain. Supports us either way, but would prefer we're not in pain. So like I said, Tim Allen as well. It's kind of amazing. I love these kinds of people who say, to them it's a real thing. They're saying, I was living unhealthy, I was hiding from things, I was weak or whatever, their personal testament. And to say, now they're close to God, and they pray and they live a certain way, and Alice Cooper can still do his concerts and Tim Allen can still do his thing. But they're spiritual, and I dig that. Even when interviewers try to pressure them, are you a this, are you a that, what religion, a lot of times they say it's not religious, it's spiritual, and I really admire that too. So understand that Spirit has such a love and compassion for us that it's always recommending the easy way, but supports us, still is with us because it's within us, even if we choose the hard way. But that there's always this loving, this tapping on the window, the door, hey, would you like to try a different way? And all I'm recommending today is that we remember, let's just get with it. Let's just start every day with that. What is it today? What would you have me do today? And Spirit will, using angels and whatever else, Spirit's going to find a way to completely design your day. This is in A Course in Miracles, the way it describes, it's like shifting from a day where we used to have to figure it all out to a day that we just surrender to, that's already been planned. And it still means you do laundry and you do this and you still do your things. We don't become irresponsible, which is another error of spiritual people sometimes. They think, we'll just hang out and be irresponsible. You still do things, but there's not as much effort. There's not as much doing. Time will fly more. You'll not forget some of your tasks as much because you're in the zone. Doing things with spiritual guidance does not mean you just start spacing things and you'll only do one thing for the day. You could have still a very busy day, but it becomes more effortless. It's efficient, which is all I've always said. Mastery is efficient, but not type A type efficient, not frenetic efficient, just clear, clean, in the zone. So watch and be careful, ask for guidance. When you get guidance, remember, go with that as best you can and watch and see if by the fruits things open up. For me, if the fruits, meaning the results are there, that's kind of a good sign, right? I kind of look at that. I don't make that my only sign, but that's usually like, okay, I knocked on the door and the door opened. That's a good sign that someone's home. I'm watering and feeding this soil here. I wonder if that, if I'm doing a good job. Oh, look, sprouts started showing through. So, there you go, common sense. Buddha was an advocate of using rational thinking and common sense, he says, right? So you see the sprouts, you go, I must be doing this right. So the catch, though, is now that I've watered and fed and I see the sprouts, do I stop watering and feeding? No. Micro adjustments, keep taking care of it. Keep taking care of it. Oh, they're turning yellow, maybe too much water. Back off a little to the right, little to the left. Micro adjustments. And keep asking every day. Instead of, I got guidance on this once, so I'm good to go for the next year, it's constant micro adjustments. And that's very important because Spirit is intentionally not telling us the full picture. Okay? Intentionally. Because when it says, I want you to go to the store and buy milk today, it's not just, wow, Spirit told me to go buy milk. There's also the people on the road you're running into, not literally, but people on the road you're passing by, people in the store you bump into and say hi. And there's a whole design that we forget. But if we're in our tunnel vision of, I was guided to get milk, that's all I'm going to do, then you kind of miss the rest of the day. You got maybe 1% or 10% of it, but you miss the rest of the day. So don't brush things off, and don't brush them off as, it's not in divine timing. Make sure you've done what you can to get things moving forward, and then accept them when they can't. And that's a little bit of that divine timing. That metaphor of God rests on the seventh day is always needing to be remembered in the back of our minds. Even God rests on the seventh day. So I write something, I picture it, I visualize it, I meditate it, pray it, I set it into motion, I make the calls. And there's a point where I let it be and have to move on to something else. Sometimes it still can be heartbreaking because the momentum's there, the energy's there, and it looks like it's all clear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's done. And instead it's 1, 2, 3, 4, pause, pause, pause. The beginning of 5, pause, pause, and it gets a little scary, a little frustrating, a little confusing. But all I can do, I being any one of us that chooses such, is say, okay, if there's anything more for me to do, let me know. Otherwise, I'll chill. I'll take that as a sign of needing to chill. And that's kind of how I deal with that. I just step back. And a lot of times when I do that, I'll already be shown in advance that something's not going to happen just yet. And then it makes it much easier to handle it when it goes weird. I kind of saw that coming. Still, it's frustrating, tempting to be frustrated, because it would have been nice to do that. But if we live in the zone and we pray every day, then we can't just say we pray to get what we want. We're praying to develop a closer connection with Spirit, believe it or not. You might think you want to pray to get a new car or whatever it is. It's really not. It's about closer connection to Spirit. So Spirit's just saying, I'll tell you what, give me what I want, I'll give you what you want. You get closer to me, I'll give you the dang car. Whatever, right? And we say, okay, great. So I'll promise to pray. Now you're bargaining. You got to be careful. You're bargaining. But let's say you do. I'm going to start praying and meditating more often. And the car's coming your way. But all of a sudden, your tax person filed your papers wrong. Your credit didn't look good enough to get the car. And now it's confusing. I thought I had a bargain with God, which you shouldn't be making anyway. But I thought I had a deal here. I thought I was going to do some things and be more spiritual, and the car would come more easily. That's what we do when we start our little manifestation games, and I'm going to start visualizing to get something, and it doesn't happen. Because Spirit's saying, look, do you want me in this with you or not? Well, yes. I wanted you involved with my manifestation so you'd get me my car. The Spirit's going, no, it's not what it's about. It's about your closer connection to me. And your closer to connection with me is going to come from something you don't even realize. I know you better than you know you. I know that you have a part of you that loves getting what you want when you want it, and you want the car. But I'm going to put an obstacle in there for various reasons that you won't understand consciously. But some of it's going to be to where you're going to show me you can be happy even if you don't get the car. And there you go. So we learn that's a little bit more of what divine timing is all about. Divine timing does not mean sabotage of our good. What it means is, despite what we think is the right timing, there's a different timetable altogether. Kind of like there's a line here, and there's human timing and there's divine timing, and they're usually not synchronized. What we can do is do our best in the human time of things, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but only 5 days a week do people typically work and so on. So we're dealing with the stuff of day-to-day stuff. In heaven, there is none of that. But how do we get this synchronized? We find a moment in our hours of our days to keep getting back to center so that something can penetrate through and reach us wherever we are. And it can give us some support, even though the outcome might be days away. We might feel some emotional support in the meantime. We might feel some psychological ease. We might have a dream at night of something very comforting because the Comforter, the Divine Mother, comes to us to say it'll be okay. Whatever. It just depends. Even people's healings. We pray once and we think, I prayed, so it's supposed to happen. Up in here, it's already there. There's no sickness. So what are you praying for? Well, I want them healed. No, what you want is them fixed now. If you want them healed, you will adjust to heaven's time and recognize they're not even sick. But you're not. How do we know that? Because the way you're reacting to this. Saying, oh, poor them, and I want them healed, or I want me healed, and all that. So that's the bottom line. Shift instead into heaven's time. And then there's a deeper trust that everything's okay. Is that easy? Heck no. In the human condition, human plane, nope. Because there's calls to make by a certain time, and hours end and the banks close and whatever else. The mail doesn't go out this week because there's a holiday, whatever. We have all these odd little things. But to trust that somehow Spirit's out of all that mess and we'll find a way to work it all out and make it all happen in not just the time we wanted, but in the perfect time for the greatest good imaginable and beyond our imagination. I pray this has made good sense, and thank you so much for your time.